There is nothing wrong with making mistakes in life, honest mistakes. But when you repeat your mistakes and make the same mistakes again and again, then Houston, we have a problem. It's the reason the Writers Guild of America and SAG-AFTRA are waving their pointless pickets around Hollywood Boulevard day in and day out. It's the reason we've got a vile, man-hating Barbie movie by crazy Margot Robbie. It's the reason streaming is dead. It's the reason studios and networks are making no money. And yesterday, the Hollywood Reporter did a massive write-up about Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. More creative bankruptcy, more reshoots, more cutting. Now this time they've cut Ben Affleck's cameo as Batfleck and Michael Keaton's cameo as Batman. So who knows what they've done to this movie. But this movie stopped being James Wan's and Jason Momoa's a long time ago. We're going to read the article. But yes, James Gunn, a writer-director himself, is interfering with another director's movie. Something he would never ever tolerate. The hypocrisy isn't lost on me. I'm quite happy to support James Gunn's vision for DCU and give the man a chance. But basically, his interference in the old DCEU movies lacks any logic whatsoever. Start your own franchise. Don't worry about these movies. Let them play out. But what he's doing here is as dumb as you can be. Warner Brothers' quest to build a better Aquaman sequel, free reshoots, 2 Batmans, and non-stop test screenings. Yeah, I've discussed this concept of the test screenings. Hollywood hasn't changed. I've explained to you before. They look like a modernizing, ever-changing franchise, should I say, industry, but they're not. They're doing the same things they did 30, 40 years ago. It's pretty obvious what you need to do. Make your movie. Let your visionary directors make their movie. Let them go on their gut feelings and give us what they need to give us, but not now. They're on Twitter, they're doing test screenings. They're changing movies on the say-so of people who have no idea what makes a great story, what's great art, and this is where the problem lies. They showed test audiences Zack Snyder's Justice League, and clearly they didn't like it, and that's why they were convinced to get rid of Snyder and bring in Joss Whedon and give us the bomb that was Justice League. To some insiders, the fact that Warner's is willing to keep spending money to make the film better shows that the studio has faith in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, James Wan's sequel to his $1 billion hit. Listen to these words. Think how illogical these words are. To some insiders, the fact that Warner's is willing to keep spending money to make the film better shows that the studio has faith in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. How can you have faith in something if you keep on changing the movie? This paragraph here makes, it makes little sense whatsoever. If you have faith in James and Jason's movie, you wouldn't keep on changing it. This is nothing to do with improving the movie or having faith in the movie. This is about removing Batfleck and Michael Keaton. Plain and simple. And who knows what Gunn's replacing these elements with. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is in uncharted waters, with the next several weeks potentially setting its course for good or for ill. The sequel to Warner Brothers' 2018 DC movie is coming off a round of reshoots that occurred in New Zealand in mid-June and involved stars including Jason Momoa, Patrick Wilson, according to multiple sources. This is the third round of reshoots for the movie directed by James Wan. That is almost an unprecedented number even for a movie of this scale. Think about this. They're spending on changing a movie that had a vision. This was based on an idea by the actor who plays Aquaman, Jason Momoa. He's very passionate about our aquatic life, about our environment, and he was telling a story. Most of his story was binned a long time ago. These people are a disgrace. No, Boris Kitt of The Hollywood Reporter. They don't have faith in this movie. They're not trying to improve this movie. Basically, they're spending a lot of money to rewrite the narrative of this movie. Basically, what this article tells you, as a consumer and a DC fan, don't watch this movie. You know, this movie, whatever it was going to be, isn't going to be that anymore. Now, I had the privilege of watching the original, one of the first test screenings for this movie. Now we know by reading this, the movie that I saw won't be the movie that we see in theatres. It's like the Flash movie. The movie I saw, the test screening I saw, was nothing like the movie we got in theatres. And this is what they do. But basically what I'm saying to you is these test audience things, these test screenings are not working. How many movies, right, have flopped using the advice of test audiences? The Flash movie listened to test audiences. It failed. But they keep on making the same mistakes. They won't change who and what they are. Lost Kingdom has faced several headwinds as it swims towards a December 20th release date. It was postponed several times. It originally was due to bow in December 2022. And like its DC movie brother, The Flash, its making has now spanned 3 regimes at Warner Brothers. How can a film survive 3 regimes? It's ridiculous. And none of these regimes understood to leave James Wan alone. Do you understand who James Wan is? James Wan is a pioneer. If you need to know any evidence that the man knows what he's doing, watch his horror movies. Watch his first Aquaman movie. His first Aquaman movie is literally Star Wars underwater. And James Gunn is nowhere near the level of James Wan. Now, I can defend James. As I say, I can, say I'm going to give him a chance with the DCU because I haven't seen what he's planning. But these decisions he's making, are starting to test my faith in the man. The movie was greenlit under the Warner regime led by former film boss Toby Emmerich and his Lieutenant DC Films head Walter Hamada as a sequel to Aquaman, which proved to be a surprise hit and stands as the highest grossing DC movie of all time with $1.148 billion. Principal photography wrapped in January 2022. By the way, it's not the most profitable DC movie. Joker is the most profitable comic book movie of all time. Profitable. Not how much it made altogether, but profitable. Barely cost under 100 million to make it. Made $1 billion, a big profit there. And of course, basically, there were movies that were released that, when we talk about Superman, the movies, 300 million, we're talking a couple of billion in today's money. So even though the figure is the highest, actually, it's not the highest making movie, just to correct them there. But, don't let the facts hit you in the way, THR. Anyway, but by summer, Emmerich was out. Hamada soon followed, both casualties of the merger that created Warner Brothers Discovery. The movie was in the middle of post-production and beginning test screenings that summer. While a timeline is not clear from summer 2022 to the beginning of 2023, The Lost Kingdom underwent 2 rounds of reshoots and held several uninspiring test screenings. Do you understand? It wasn't James Wan's movie that had the uninspiring test screenings. It was the reshoots that they ordered him to make, even before the 3rd round, which are actually the James Gunn reshoots. They ruined this movie a long time ago. And I'll repeat, this stopped being James Wan's and Jason Momoa's film a very long time ago. This is why this industry is on its knees. People keep on asking me, Mick, why are they on strike? We don't understand why they're on strike. What's going on with this industry? It's imploding. Yes, it's imploding because they drove out the pioneers of industry for hugging too hard, and now they've got a bunch of activists who don't know what they're doing. I spoke on my previous video. I said, art used to be about understanding that you have to break a few eggs to make the best of omelettes. They're not willing to do it anymore. They're trying to adhere to this, that, and the other. And they don't know how to make a great piece of entertainment. In fact, making a great piece of entertainment may no longer be their motivation. I'll correct myself. It is not their motivation. After one round of test screenings, new Warner's film bosses Michael DeLuca and Pamela Adby got involved, as they were at running point on DC until Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav could find a permanent DC boss to replace Hamada. Sources say in full, Adby took a strong creative stance and got involved in the editing of one cut. However, when that version tested, it scored lower than the previous version. That led to another round of reshoots. Do you understand? Pam Adby, the co-CEO of Warner Brothers Pictures, helped to cut one of the test screenings for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. What's the CEO doing? Getting involved, interfering with a final cut of a test screening. This is what's going on at Warner, this is what's going on at Disney, and this is why Universal are trouncing them. By the way, I do want to talk about what Christopher Nolan has said about Star Wars, because I think something very, very exciting could be developing there, so please stay with me. Different visions of executives, notwithstanding, it is unclear what the problems were. But one insider said the issue of the story clarity has been an ongoing concern. Also a concern, Batman. The story clarity, right? You need good writers. So clearly Jason Momoa isn't a writer, but he had an idea for a story. So what you do, you take Jason's story, you bring in a really, really good, a really good adept writer to adapt Jason's story. But they clearly didn't do that. And these are just common sense. This is me, a man who doesn't work in Hollywood, who's been watching films since he was a little boy. And if I know how to make a movie, how to make an effective story, how to create effective art, you would think these people do. You would think that they would know more than some twat sitting in a bedroom talking in a video. But clearly they don't. And that's the most worrying thing of what's going on in this industry. Also a concern, Batman. Hamada wanted Michael Keaton's version of the character to be akin to Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury in the Marvel movies. I think who you're thinking about is Amanda Waller. Basically, Amanda Waller is the Nick Fury of DC. In fact, she's a much better version than Fury. She's ruthless, and we've seen her be ruthless in both Suicide Squad movies, in Peacemaker, in Black Adam, when she threatens Black Adam. She's brilliant. We didn't need Batman, an old 80-year-old Batman, to be a Nick Fury character. But anyway, an elder statesman who could pop up in various films, including the now shelved Batgirl, as well as The Lost Kingdom, but shifting release dates muddled things at one point. The Lost Kingdom was set to open in March 2023, several months before Keaton's return in June. Now, this is the real problem. Because the order of the films being released changed. They had a plan with the DCEU. Aquaman will be released at some point, and then The Flash, whatever. So they were going to reset the timeline. But this is why Aquaman has had a round of 1 and 2 reshoots to change what they were doing in those movies because of the order they were all being released. As I spoke about at the time, the postponements of all of these 4 or 5 movies was a big issue and created bigger problems. Why did they really postpone those movies? That's the interesting question. What an unadulterated mess. The Flash 2023 is The Flash. So in late July 2022, 2 months after Adby and DeLuca took over Warner's, Ben Affleck joined a round of reshoots as Bruce Wayne to replace a scene Keaton shot. But then the movie was moved again, this time to after The Flash, putting Affleck's appearance in question. The latest cut of the film features neither version of The Dark Knight. According to sources, as the new DC heads James Gunn and Peter Safran do not want to promise a movie universe. But right, let me listen. Let me explain something to you. You don't need to promise anything. I understand why you're scared of Affleck being there, because people will get excited. And by the way, excited by a great Batman. But let's be clear about this. You don't have to continue anything in your new universe from the old DCEU. You can just let these movies run. But I understand that people are going to be excited. Maybe they'll be more excited for Ben Affleck than James Gunn's universe, and maybe that's James Gunn's real concern. Look, the whole situation has been a mess since Man of Steel. You know me. You know I like a lot of movies in this, all the movies in the Snyderverse. I like a lot of DCEU movies. Man of Steel is perfection. BVS. I love I love the first Suicide Squad. I love both Suicide Squads. You know, I love Wonder Woman. I love Zack Snyder's Justice League. I love Aquaman, right? So there's a lot of great movies, but the running of the franchise was problematic from the very beginning. And, you know, these journalists just don't understand the history of the DCEU and how muddled it is. A movie universe that will not come to fruition, nor tie it down excessively to past failures. It was pretty chaotic, said one source. So what they're trying to do is blame the old DCEU for the changes they're making, and that simply won't wash. Let's read this again. So, to promise a movie universe that will not come to fruition, nor tie it to an excessively to past failures. What are those failures? Studio interference. You had a Superman movie written by Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer, the people who brought you Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises. Imagine that. If you closed your eyes and I said to you, the people who gave you the Dark Knight trilogy are writing a Superman movie, Man of Steel. That's who did that movie. Zack Snyder directed BVS, a very different, unique take on the CBM. It's not a bad movie. It's utterly controversial. It didn't make the money they wanted it to make. That's because they brought an auteur to make these movies. And if they wanted kind of kiddie-ish MCU movies, they should have brought in the right creatives. And some of the chaos may not have been the studios or filmmakers' fault. Listen to this. Some of the calendar moves were due to overloaded visual effects, which is a lie. These are the reasons they used for delaying these 5 movies the previous year. This is a blatant lie. If this is the case and they delayed these movies because of overloaded queues, because of COVID, because they were saying, you know, the visual effects artists were overworked, right? Then why did the Flash movie look so bad when they finally released it? This is a spin article. Were due to overloaded visual effects houses, a phenomenon that occurred during the pandemic and that affected both Flash and Last Kingdom, causing a cascade of release date pushes. It's a lie. So why was Spider-Man No Way Home? And I know some people will criticize the CGI in that movie, but I think the CGI is great in that movie. Why didn't they have a problem? There's several other movies that didn't have the same problem. These are blatant lies because they didn't improve the VFX for the Flash movie. Basically, when you take in what Access Media say to you, you are sold a lemon. They are desperate to make money. They tried their best to make The Flash a $2 billion tentpole movie. They lied to you that Stephen King loved the movie. They lied to you that Tom Cruise liked the movie. These are the biggest bullshitters. Basically, they are the analogy of Del Boy and Arthur Daly. Yeah, where this time next year we'll be millionaires. These are the biggest bullshitters, but the problem is the audience are on the internet day in, day out. Movie Twitter knows what's going on, and you're not going to sell us this lemon. This is an article born in fear to spin a narrative to you, but it's so transparent that you can tell what's going on here. More test screenings of cuts occurred in February and again in April. By this time, Safran, a producer on the first Aquaman, as well as The Last Kingdom, had become a co-head of the newly created DC Studios, along with Gunn. It is unclear how Safran's transition shifted the movie's fortunes. If at all, insiders say that the filmmakers were in the dumps over the seemingly never-ending post-production process and waterlogged test scenes. However, the skies may have cleared with the new reshoots. Oh, really? Like the new reshoots they did for the Flash movie a couple of summers ago? I don't think so. Basically, whatever happens to this movie, don't you dare say this is James Wan's fault, Mick. Don't come to me and say that. James Wan is a very good guy. I have spoken to James on many occasions. He won't allow his trailers to be released unless they're perfectly redefined visually. So, this is not on James Wan. This is not on Jason Momoa. This is on a multitude of different leaderships and James Gunn's interference. He didn't learn his lessons from shoving George Clooney in a cameo, which was utterly wrong and didn't work. People saying, oh, well, if Cavill and Affleck and Gal were at the end, it will confuse people. And George Clooney cameoing, a man who hasn't played Batman for a decade or two or however long it's been, that's not confusing. It's ridiculous. And, I'm surprised this is the mentality of James Gunn. It just goes to show you that we have problems ahead. Gunn is said to have weighed in on the most recent cut, and the leadership approved a 5-day shoot, sources say. The shoot went so well that Wan and company completed what they needed in only 4. No, it didn't go well. All you did was for 4 days replace Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck with another cameo. James Wan is not happy at all. I can tell you that right here and right now. But at the end of the day, this is a spin piece because this is how scared they are. But what this piece has actually done has created more frustration and more negativity, and this piece is going to cement this film in being a flop. And to some, the fact that Warner's is willing to keep spending money to make the film better shows that the studio has faith in the Lost Kingdom. As I said earlier, they were abbreviating this quote at the beginning to try and make it sound like that this film's A-OK now. I don't think they've got faith in this movie whatsoever, otherwise they wouldn't be changing it, and also I think they're so desperate. According to sources, the filmmakers of Blue Beetle, the other remaining DC movie that was made during the AT&T era and comes out in August, asked for and received 2 days of additional shooting. Safran has also been a producer on Blue Beetle before his ascension to the executive ranks. It's very interesting. The one underlining factor of the DCEU after Snyder was removed is Peter Safran, and they've promoted him to co-CEO of the new franchise. Interesting, we're seeing these older movies fail, so I know let's allow Peter Safran to fail upwards. Now, I've always liked the way Safran speaks, but he's involved with both sides of this mess. Lost Kingdom is already an expensive production. It was greenlit at a $205 million budget and shot during the pandemic, which was a burdensome expense on tentpole productions. Additionally, every frame of the movie involves visual effects, another major cost. The reshoots have only raised that overall budget. So you've got to be looking at now over $300 million, surely. Lost Kingdom is the final movie of the DC Extended Universe, which launched a decade ago with Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. Its December release date approaches as Warner's DC movies are flopping at an unmatched level. October's Black Adam, March's Shazam Fury of the Gods, also produced by Safran, yeah, even they realise there's a problem there, and last month's The Flash were money losers in their theatrical runs. Though Gunn and Safran plan on rebooting DC films with Superman Legacy, that title won't be out until July 2025. No one wants another miss, and there are questions as to how much more bruising the DC movie brand can take. Yes, it's basically like Rocky Balboa fighting Drago in Rocky IV, where Rocky just keeps on taking punch after punch. How much more can the DC brand take from these people? That's the important question here. This is not good. This doesn't put DC in a good light. It doesn't put James Gunn in a good light, and it frustrates and angers people, which you don't want. You don't want a brand to keep on winding your public up. So why are they revealing all this information? Well, because they're hoping they can spin the narrative. But telling people that there's no Batfleck in the movie, one of the most popular versions of Batman of all time, isn't a good way to get butts on seats. And that's another problem with New Hollywood. They are tactically inept. The filmmakers and studio know the value that smart post-production can bring. The first Aquaman was also facing turbulent waves and is said to have found its footing only in post when a new ending was burnished and the movie tightened to a zippier 2 hours 23 minutes. But that's a normal thing with movies in your post-production. We're talking about, the director and the actor having a defined vision, and that vision being changed, that vision being redefined by the new co-CEO of DC Studios. It's a totally different situation. And again, this is a spin article. As for Wan, he was upbeat when he spoke to THR in April. You see what I mean? As he continued to work on the film, this movie has something to talk about climate change, but it's still a film, action, fantasy movie. Basically, James Wan has also said that he's frustrated and has become lost with the changes that he's had to make to align to the ever-increasing changes in the DC, live-action universe. James Wan is not a happy bunny. No director, no human being interfered with. It's a bit like in Passion of the Christ when they're all beating the shit out of Jesus. This is what James Wan has gone through, and it's absolutely despicable. Whatever happens to this movie is not James Wan's fault, and I won't hear a word said against him. So basically, I think that's the article. Yes, that is the article. So you've heard me read it out. Please let me know in the comments what you think about this. I think this is despicable. It confuses the narrative even more, and it basically continues to tell the public that we do not know what we're doing. And I will watch this film. I want to watch this film. I'm hoping it's a good film, but I have little hope now. The constant interferences, this is what they're doing at Marvel. Because basically what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, it's not about a director having a vision, it's about Feige having a vision, and he keeps on changing that vision throughout the shoot and the production. And in the end, it becomes something totally unwatchable. This is exactly what's happening to Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. They were dumb enough to tell the public Keaton was going to cameo. Then they were dumb enough to tell the public that Affleck was coming in. Then they were dumb enough to tell the public that maybe Keaton and Batfleck would both be in the movie, and now neither are going to be in the movie. It's ridiculous. It's creatively bankrupt. And basically, it's like seeing, I suppose, a dopey guy just constantly tripping over. And this is why they are at the lowest ebb of Hollywood history, and they're about to all go into receivership. Empires are destroyed from within. Well, something very, very interesting happened while Christopher Nolan was promoting Oppenheimer. He started to talk about Star Wars and even his interest in making a Star Wars movie. Now, we all know that Christopher Nolan would never go near Star Wars Disney, so this is leading me to think that something very exciting could be happening in terms of Lucasfilm. Take a listen to this. Christopher Nolan calls out Hollywood's willful denial of what made Star Wars a success. Acclaimed filmmaker Christopher Nolan criticizes studio executives for forgetting the essence of what makes classic movies such as Star Wars work. Oppenheimer writer-director Christopher Nolan recently blasted Hollywood executives for their willful denial of what made the original Star Wars film a success. Bear with me, my phone's frozen. Oppenheimer writer-director Christopher Nolan recently blasted Hollywood executives for their willful denial of what made the original Star Wars films a success. Sorry about this, my phone's really playing up. Nolan invoked 1977 Star Wars: A New Hope to back up his criticism of studios' current approach to filmmaking during an interview with The Telegraph. Whether for budgetary reasons or reasons of control, studios now look at a screenplay as a series of events and say this is the essence of what the film is. He said that's completely at odds with how cinema developed right from the Lumiere brothers train pulling into the station as a pure audiovisual experience. But it's a very popular fallacy, sometimes with critics as well, quite frankly, that all that matters is the scale of the story being told. People will tell you that the success of Star Wars had nothing to do with its visual effects, and it was all down to its great story, Nolan continued. But I mean, clearly that's not the case. It is indeed a great story, but it's also an incredible visual and oral experience. So this willful denial of what movies actually are has set in. Nolan's comments come after the acclaimed auteur seemingly hinted that he's interested in helming a Star Wars movie in a recent interview. Nolan refused to rule out the possibility that he may one day make a film set in a galaxy far away, although it's worth noting that he's not currently attached to any projects. The prospect of Nolan directing a Star Wars movie will no doubt appeal to many fans of the franchise, particularly given his reputation for incorporating pioneering practical effects into his work. The filmmaker has arguably taken his old school approach to a new level in Oppenheimer, which recreates the world's first nuclear explosion without the aid of CGI. According to Nolan, Oppenheimer's Trinity test scene took months and months to figure out, with visual effects supervisor Andrew Jackson running a range of experiments to convincingly mimic an atomic bomb blast in camera. So what do we make of all of that? Well, I'm very surprised that Christopher Nolan has gone on record for his disdain of Kathleen Kennedy and Star Wars Disney and Star Wars Lucasfilms dealing, this creative bankruptcy leadership of Star Wars. But he's put his hat in the ring and said that these people have no idea what they're doing, that they're living in denial. Of course, the identity politics and all of that hasn't been mentioned. Christopher Nolan isn't an idiot. He doesn't want to get into that situation. I think we all know that Christopher Nolan is a huge fan and studier of cinema history. And he clearly has he had a great love for Richard Donner's Superman the movie and used that as inspiration when he was making Batman Begins. He's also confirmed he will not be making any more superhero movies. He's done that. Fair enough. What kind of Star Wars film could Christopher Nolan make? At first I was a bit concerned when this was being discussed, because I think the last thing we want is a realistic Star Wars film like Andor. But it's clear he respects George Lucas's ethics for Star Wars and wants to go back to making Star Wars films like George used to do. Maybe he wouldn't be against working with George Lucas as well. As I say, I can never see Christopher Nolan working with Disney. This is an auteur who wants to do what he wants to do with his art. This leads me to believe that the studio that Christopher Nolan is at the moment attached to, Universal, is looking to acquire Lucasfilm. We know that Disney are under huge financial pressure and they're selling off some of their assets. There have been rumors that they have been looking to sell off Lucasfilm. Now, I know we heard rumors about Zaslav trying to swoon Nolan into coming back to WB. I find that utterly unlikely. I expect Oppenheimer to be a huge hit. I expect Nolan to stay attached to Universal. Yes, and I do believe that Universal are looking to acquire Lucasfilm. And if they do, I believe Christopher Nolan will be attached to running that universe. Nothing excites me more this is more exciting than what's happening with DC. A Star Wars universe, a Lucasfilm, run by, a pioneer like Christopher Nolan, a man who didn't go to film school, who didn't study the craft, but understands the craft, because in life, if you consume something so deeply and it means something to you and you study it like he has without going to film school, you can become an adept artist. Sometimes you can become a naturally talented artist, and this is what Nolan has become. So what I would say is watch this space, because Lucasfilm could be going to Universal. Universal is becoming more and more powerful by the day. They have the most successful movie so far this year in the Super Mario Brothers movie. It took over $1 billion. They're acquiring new things all the time. They're a very ambitious company, and I do believe it is a very realistic possibility that they could be the new incumbents, the new owners of Lucasfilm, and Christopher Nolan, the guy who's who's basically put in charge to lead an exciting new era for a Star Wars future. As I say, nothing excites me more. Fingers crossed, I will keep you apprised of that situation.